Okay, so hello and welcome to our RayPack Studio live webinar, and thanks for joining. Before we start, I have one information. So during the recorded session, all participants are muted and we will send you the recording afterwards. If you have questions, please feel free to use the chat function and we will answer this. So first of all, Marcin, I think we would like to introduce ourselves. Do you want to start?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Hello, my name is Marcin Otrowski. Nice to see you on the webinar today. I'm lead program manager of RaySuite, also a developer of RayPack, and privately I'm a great enthusiast and really following the new technologies, including MSIX. But like you'll see today during the webinar, it's not the MSIX that's going to be the core subject today, and I hope that you like it.
Perfect. Thanks, Marcin. So my name is Lara Soka, and I'm working in the area of product management, and I'm involved in the new and further development topics of our product portfolio. And I'm glad to present you today, together with Marcin, the newest highlights of RayPack Studio. So we have a short agenda. Today we will present the feature highlights of the new version and of course demonstrate them in a live demo. Afterwards, we have some time for Q&A sessions, so then you can ask everything around RayPack Studio. So with version 7, RayPack Studio delivers even more capabilities. For example, the package store for analyze quality assured and immediately deployable software packages with just one click. The new technology Ray package for high-level automation for software package creation with library of configuration options. And of course, our RayPack for enterprise software packaging for highest expectations. All these types can be combined with each other to get not only the best cost benefit, but also time savings and a huge impact on effort reduction. And that's what we would like to present you today. And now I hand over to Marcin and look forward to the feature highlights.
Right. We're going to start with a just quick overview. I'm really going to scratch the surface of what new things we brought into RayPack 7.0. This is going to be just a few kind of static slides, but later on I'm going to go into the live mode where you will be able to see all of this live. And we decided to increase the major version of our product. If we step back into the history, the previous release and family of RayPack 6 was heavily focused on the new coming MSIX technology. So we brought a lot of new features into that, including the MSIX itself with a full-fledged editor to create, to edit MSIX packages. We also added support for MSIX App Attach, for App Installer, and the whole ecosystem around it. Plus, we also focused on improvements to the existing code base, which is pretty much something which I would say would be the motto of our product. We at Raynet, we're pretty open at new stuff coming, yet we still recognize that there is still a lot happening in, so to say, legacy or classic world, including the MSI packaging and other. And as we spoke to our customers, we determined there is a small hole in the way current packaging works. So there are a lot of customers who actually, from some reasons, don't want to directly go into the MSIX world, which, by the way, I suppose is the future in the Windows packaging. The packaging on Windows itself, it has been long and bumpy road. So back on the very beginning, where before even introduction of Windows installer, there was literally no standard at all. Everyone was doing custom scripted or programmed installations, and it was okay, yet without standards, it was not possible to actually have any control on your setups, including whether they install per machine or not, whether they are fully silent, and stuff like that. So that has been obviously identified. Microsoft has introduced Windows installer since, which has been there plenty of years now. And there were even more ways how to deploy products on Windows. With MSI, pretty cool in terms of you could have a look on everything which is inside. You could customize, you could change every single bit of your installation. Yet the switch to the installer was pretty difficult, at least for some of more complex packages where essentially a repackaging was required for every single one. So this used to be working properly, maybe a slightly time-consuming task, but still possible for most of the apps, yet it still produces the challenges. These challenges are even more important these days. If you imagine like software like web browsers or some other frequently used but also frequently released, where it's really important to be always up to date in terms of hot fixes, security holes, and stuff like that. And the question is, if repackaging is an answer to that, if a new version comes today of your beloved browser, are you able to deliver the new version, test it and stuff tomorrow? So the whole repackaging, testing, and all this classic packaging would take time, maybe hours, maybe days, again, depending on how complex the software is. The MSIX improves several stuff. It has also pretty good tooling. So you could use RayPack, you could use also Microsoft tools to get into the MSIX from the existing setup, yet still the repackaging is a core concept of that. So again, time consuming, although the, so to say, principle of being absolutely clean as it used to be in terms of Windows installer might have been toned down a bit. So what our customers were saying is, we rather, for at least some software, stick to the original setups, which we recognize is a valid point. It's a valid point specifically for small or even medium businesses where time and relative lack of complexity is the winning factor. So we've been thinking around, so how to do it, how to make sure you can just take the existing setup of your browser, which is not yet an MSIX, which is not yet an MSI. How can you wrap them all together? How can you add required dependencies? And how to deliver it quickly without repackaging? And the second question was how to do it in terms of the standards which are out there on the market. And also suggested by our users, our partners, were things like PowerShell. There is currently one pretty widely recognized technology on the market called PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit. And as a matter of fact, it has been from some time in RayPack. It was already possible in previous version to quickly wrap a single setup to get there, to get it quickly, to get it with some common interface. You can read about PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit on their website. It's an open source framework. It's a set of functions which are pretty powerful, which are standardized with source code being publicly available. And many customers are also extending and building on top of them, adding some custom functions or things which just simply connect to their deployment systems or some internal custom functionality. And we decided to pick it up as our choice and continue to build on top of that. So what we brought in RayPack 7.0 is ability to natively package using PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit. And we did this so that there is not even a dedicated RayPack project to do that. You can use RayPack to even open your existing code base. If you've been doing anything with PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit, it's super easy to get started. Just open RayPack, pick up your project, and it's going to recognize your PS1 deployment file. So I'm going to show you in details how this works and where this saves time and how to actually benefit from that. Next to that, we continued asking ourselves, so if we have an editor which is capable of doing that. How about moving forward? How about using that to publish to systems where there is not quite good toolkit available for the packaging? And what we did is you could use RayPack. You could use this new module to come up and produce stuff which can be then deployed into Intune, for example, which is also going to be part of our installation. Finally, like I said in the beginning, primary concern in many cases is to be fast and accurate. You could start from scratch with PowerShell Edit Burn Toolkit. You can wrap your setups as it was partially available in previous versions and now expanded in 7.0. But also what is really interesting is the package store, which actually combines these both worlds. So this is a set of packages of software which is pre-packaged by Raynet, but later on, as you configure your package using some high-level wizards and, so to say, business-oriented configurations, you could easily tweak it further, again, using our native PowerShell editor. So also that is going to be shown live pretty soon. For users who've been using our PSADT integration, there was just a good news. We have out-of-the-box integration of the newest version of the toolkit, which at the time of release was 3.8.4. Moving next, we have also enhancements for users who still prefer to go for the repackaging route. And to be more precise, the repackaging using our bulk conversion module, PackBot, or Pack Recorder using virtual machines. There were some complaints in previous versions that it was not quite obvious how to set up virtual machines specifically for Hyper-V, and we addressed these issues by coming up with a completely new editor where defining your snapshots, the credentials, and your machine is super easy. And as a bonus, in that version, it's possible to combine the integration between Hyper-V and vSphere machines on the same computer, which was a slight limitation in versions up to 7.0. So there are plenty of improvements. Hyper-V users should be really happy about of them. And for generic use, we also implemented a few feature improvements in PackBot. For example, you can now define a repackaging task with a complete folder. So if you have a setup with a bunch of cap files or some extra resources or maybe two executables, you can just add the whole directory and PackBot will take care of putting them on the virtual machine and start repackaging. Previously, it was kind of tricky to do that. Right now, it's out of the box supported. Now, before we go to live, a couple of highlights which I'm going to show more like live. Windows 2021 H1 was released in between, and we have now a full support for that, meaning that in terms of packaging, you can target Windows 1021 H1 as your dependency in MSIX, for example. And in terms of testing, which is covered in our product by our module RayQC Advanced, 21H1 is also supported as a target operating system. If you have been using RayQC Advanced with command line features to test against Windows 10, you should get this automatically after the upgrade. Otherwise, you just have to go and adjust your command line or go to the UI and use the wizard to pick up the right rule set, and then you'll receive the results for 21H1. We also spend a lot of time on internal work, and you should benefit from improved conversion rate to formats like AppV, MSIX, and Citrix app layering. That last part being covered not only by RayPack, but also by our dedicated module pack layering, which can be used to further customize, edit, and create Citrix app layering packages. That enhanced conversion means stuff like services and COM classes and other complex structures should be working in most of cases out of the box. And we covered several software and apps, popular ones, and try to improve so that there is less and less manual work, if any, required to move smoothly to MSIX and EPI formats. If you've been using Rayflow integration in RayQC, you will be happy to hear that there are extended plugins allowing you to query for additional details like SLA, category, and other properties of Rayflow. And for MSIX users, we improved several features which were either introduced in RayPack 6.x or even built on top of that. And that's specifically interesting for the app attach scenarios where you can just create your app attach images, virtual disks from any MSIX. We have the device card integration. So signing with device card is also a piece of cake. No need to use the local PFX files or locally available hardware certificates. And finally, also a lot of changes in the MSIX. Again, performance, bug fixing, and bringing in new features in the whole ecosystem. So having said that, I think we can go to the live demo. Obviously, the
Yes.
most important
So,
point.
Martin,
Mhm.
sorry for interrupt, but when you're switching to the live demo, just one hint from my side. So we have already received some questions. We will collect them and answer this in the Q&A session afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the plan is that we'll spend some time in the live environment now, where I'm going to show the RayPack 7.0 and discuss what are the potentials and where the features are. And then we'll have a Q&A session. You can ask your questions today or send them later to us. And in any case, like I said, it's just scratching the surface here. We have a pretty limited time to go into every single bit that changed in the product. But if you go to our release notes, which are available on our websites, FTP, and in links that the existing users might have already received, you can collect all of them and see, say, line by line what we did in the product and which of these new features might be important for you and where to look for them. Right. So let me start RayPack. And by the way, I think it's also something that has been pretty some time in the product, but I guess that 7.0 is the first release where we actually make a public use of that. If you download the new version, our standard deployment is the MSI based, and just like in case of RayPack 6, you can still go for like portable installation, so just running the executable. We don't really require the product to be installed, so you can bring this on your USB stick or put on the UNC share. But with this release, publicly available are also the MSIX packages of the product. So right now, the RayPack that you can see is running from the MSIX, and this is also valid for some other components, RayEval, RayQC. So getting started is super easy. Just double click your MSIX. It's not going to take a long until the RayPack is on your computer, and it's a clean and fast method of deployment. So being kind of MSIX advocate, we at Raynet believe that the vendor should also offer a choice, and there you go. You can get your RayPack in MSIX format. Another one would be Microsoft Store, which I guess is going to be updated pretty soon. Some small friction there. So essentially, there are now 3 different choices how to get RayPack. Either use the classic approach, the installer or portable installation, or go to Microsoft Store, look for RayPack, or get our MSIX and benefit from having the newest product on board. All right, so let's go back to the features of 7.0. And I'm going to start with a creation of a new project. The menu here has been slightly extended. And before I go for the really interesting part of the editor, let's just pick up where RayPack 6 kind of left. So this functionality here of creating a wrapper, you will find this in your existing installation if you take a look. And we build on top of that by extending the possibilities. So let's go and just quickly create a simple wrapper. Wrapper is just a way of saying, here's my installer. It has particular command line to install, might be backslash slash s, minus q, silent, and stuff like that. So we can define that. And after that, you benefit from a common interface handled by PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit, which, regardless of your deployment format, is it the MSI or executable, or maybe even MSIX, is going to be the same, just a quick deployment, and the admins managing your SCCM or array managed sub instance, they don't have to care anymore about how this looks like. So for this demo, I'm going to take an executable setup, but like I said, the format is pretty a secondary choice. So anything that is callable on Windows can be wrapped by pack wrapper. There is just some automatic readout of properties. We are going to leave them the way they are. Like you can see, RayPack is able to determine a silent command line for popular types of installers. In that case, for the key path, you see it's the SP minus very silent. I guess if we took Notepad or some other product, it might look a bit different. Again, depending on in which technology the setup was packed. For MSI, it's going to be something like /QB along these lines. Yet there is nothing at this state to be done manually. So you could still define your uninstallation and repair, which otherwise is not something which I would say is standardized. But for this demo, let's just stick to the installation command, not modify too much. And at this stage, there is already a choice in which format we want to have our setup wrapped. If it's just a simple installer with no further actions needed, for example, after your installation, there is some registry key to be copied, or maybe a license file to be copied, or ini, or anything that you need to have your setup, have your product customized the way you like. If there is nothing like that, you can go directly in Intune, and if you select that option, the target format is going to be Win32 Intune package, which can be then directly put into deployment system from Microsoft. I'm going to show you the first option with PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit, and then later, if time permits, go for the second one as well. So if we select PS80 as our target, that's basically everything which we had to provide on the very first step, just a bunch of basic details that you can see on the summary. And if you process, the deployment is going to be created. Before we go further, I'm going to go to the Explorer and just quickly show what we can find there. You don't have to actually be PS80 expert to understand or to work with our new extended pack wrapper. Yet, if you have an experience with that, you will certainly recognize some patterns. So we use absolutely standard toolkit. There is just some small layer built on top of that, but you can extend and you can replace on your own if you need any extension or fix, or maybe even official one. In this case, there is my key path setup, which I just selected in the wizard. There is a bunch of meta files, including the image for the branding. So if the user starts, there is some small user interface coming from PS80, like informing that the setup is just going to be installed. There is an entry point deploy app application exe, which when double clicked will silently install your app. And finally, the whole installation logic is written into the PS1 file. So as simple as that. And right now, the next step would be to customize this even further. So if I finish the wizard, as you can see, I'm now in the editor mode. And one thing I mentioned before, there is no particular, so to say, RayPack format when talking about the PS80T. So what I just did, I opened the PS1 file, which means if you have any setup which has been previously packaged with I don't know, Visual Studio Code or any kind of editor, you can open it with RayPack, and we are going to analyze its content and show the content over there. It's not, so to say, a PowerShell editor, what you see. We actually show some high-level entries. For example, here the execute process of KeyPass and some popular other choices like ini registries and stuff. But you can essentially speaking call anything that the toolkit offers, including the registry operations, ini, and many, many other. I'm going to go into details pretty soon. This was just to show you how the new editor more like looks like. But you may ask, all right, but this was just a really simple setup. So there might be actually no benefit of just wrapping it just for the sake of having a common interface, which might be to some degree right. So unless I do some post customization or add some uninstall step here, but we'll go to that very soon and show how to benefit further from this. Before that, let me demo another way of getting here. So what about we don't have yet sources for the app we want to package, or we want to have them from package store where certain high-level settings are already pre-configured and available for us. So if I go now to the main menu, so let's leave that project for a few moments on the side, and I'm going to create a new one where I'm going to discover and download some other app from package store. Like I said, package store is a library of software which can be directly pulled into RayPack, but contrary to what you may think and what some other products there might offer, they are not, say, pre-packaged. I would say the magic, the packaging happens on your machine, so it's what RayPack pulls actually off. What the user has to do is to select the app. Let's take 7-zip for that example, which has also a bunch of other versions. We have some filtering here if you need some help finding out your software, your language, or the version. And let's pick 7-zip. It can be the version 19. If you need to go back to some older, we also have them covered. And this will take a moment in which RayPack determines which options are available. We have currently yet no sources, but RayPack was able to determine with help of package store that we may first of all download them automatically. And in case you don't want them automatically from the official vendor side, here is a direct download link where you can just do it on your own. The same thing, if you already have your sources, it might also be the case of some more complex software where the sources are not publicly available. RayPack will also have it covered. So in that case, you can say, right, browse on this computer, and RayPack will be pretty happy about. So there is not always a need to download automatically from the web. But let's just use this option. 7-zip is pretty small, and it should be quickly there. Every single setup in package store has a bunch of options which are divided into two groups, the standard ones and advanced ones. The standard ones are available for I would say 99% of packages. These are some generic categories which pretty every setup supports. For example, whether the reboots should be suppressed, whether the interaction of add-remove programs should be disabled, like these buttons to uninstall the software, whether the permission installation should be enabled. Some of them may be not available because they are kind of built in out of the box. For example, this software doesn't have automatic updates, so I cannot disable them. But essentially speaking, this software doesn't update itself if the function is not provided by the vendor. Otherwise, we would have seen something different here. The really interesting part is the advanced one, and this is something which is product specific. So right now I'm in 7-zip, and what you can see here, I can choose between some different extensions which are supported by 7-zip. I can choose the language in which 7-zip has to be installed. I can change the installation tier. This app is pretty simple, but if we select 7-zip for this demo, but if you took something more complex, say a internet browser or even more complex software, the options here might be a bit more, so to say, extensive. So including some home pages, proxy settings, anything which might be relevant for each application being covered. So let's, for the time being, take 7-zip. We're going to just add some extra custom association with 7-zip, and otherwise these are just the defaults with a bunch of standard options set automatically by RayPackage. And then it's pretty much done. We can also open the folder to see. You can certainly recognize it's the same structure, whether you take an MSI setup or exe-based setup or anything else. This is like looking pretty similar. In this case, RayPack has prepared a transform file which contains the fixes and changes which were available from that. I think that in terms of 7-zip, it might be actually interesting to see what RayPack also did. So if we take a look at deploy application, for PowerShell users, it might be interesting to see that as a result of our work, there is just some custom stuff with removing the registry key for 7-zip, which we otherwise have configured in the MST. So it's an example of a software where just only MSI installer doesn't do the trick, and we have some extra post or pre steps in our setup. But that's not the point of being here. Again, we believe that not everyone must be a PowerShell programmer, and let's now try to open this file using the new editor. So let's click finish and say open. We have a pack wrapper project. And what we've just did, well, we can again revisit first, maybe key paths, which has been done previously. And let's go to the your project. The setup is pretty simple. In that case, we've just defined the install, no repair and no uninstall, but you can define this routine separately. And well, good package takes care of the installation, that it's silent, that it's clean, that it just works. But great packages might also and should take care of uninstall and repair. So making sure that we cover the full maintenance of each product. For each setup, there is also a bunch of properties available in the metadata. Again, they are read directly from the PS1 file, and that's also the place where you can see the version of the toolkit that has been used during creation, define some script properties, language, the architecture of processor, and most importantly, name, vendor, and version, so more like a branding information. Now, if we go to files and folders, there is a place to integrate all required files, setups, or just loose executables, registry keys, ini files, and stuff. So later on, you have a choice of operations. For example, start a setup, start MSIX, uninstall a patch, or just copy a resource to program files, and all of them can be defined over there. Everything that is about the resources. So if you need anything else, you can just simply import here. For example, I could say, let's take maybe Notepad and just import it to our setup. So now we will be able to create a more complex setup, which first installs KeyPass and then maybe copy the Notepad.exe into some predetermined location or where my setup is. It's not really a realistic sample, but you just get the point. Any kind of steps which might be extra required to pull it off. Now let's go to the install part. We've seen that already before. There is a high-level item here, execute process. And as you can see, there is no PowerShell involved here. There is just a high-level overview with easy-to-use editor, wizards, where you just simply enter your properties like the path, the parameters, which window style is that, whether a window has to be created or not, whether we have to wait for the process, and we just make sure that it gets correctly translated into PowerShell. And if you open any existing project, we also make sure that it gets correctly understood from your project. So no programming involved, although still knowledge of PS80 would help to understand some more complex scenarios and just squeeze it and get most of performance and features out of it. Now, what else can be done from here? Starting a setup is just pretty simple and present in most of setups. So let's just quickly take a look. We split it into several different groups. Like you could work with conditions. So even some complex logic, doing some action only if maybe language of the current user is German. It's possible thanks to branching. You can write directly to files, a text to a file. You could close processes. So if there is anything which is not which may not be running before the setup starts, can be closed. And this, by the way, uses the standard routines of PS80. You could obviously install an MSI or MSIX, or as a matter of fact, because you can start any process, this can be anything which is installable or on Windows. So it's just enough to import the resource into files and folders and say, okay, at that point, specific point of time, let it be installed by calling it with some particular command line, and then it's complete. You can copy a file in directory. We can actually go and try it out. Let's say we need that notepad.exe, which I just imported, and say from here, I'm going to take the notepad. As you can see, RayPack suggests a lot. I could use the variables from my system, or use the IntelliSense to actually help me out finding the right path of which resources are available to me. And the same goes for the destination path. So I could say, all right, so let's try to put it into program files slash backslash my notepad.exe. And then the resource will be copied. And this is how you normally do with some install files, licenses, or customization files, which are just available as a resource. And the only thing to do is to define, okay, now copy it into program files, and there you go. We have also an editor, so you can edit the conditions and variables, or just browse from the local machine, and then we will convert it to the right format and make sure the value gets where it has to be. So this is how you work with the copying. If you need any condition, you can also add it, which we, by the way, just skipped. I'm not going to go into much details, just wanted to show you that there is a pretty powerful condition builder where all variables from PS80 and from PowerShell session are available. So you can browse and search into that list and use the standard conditions and operators to actually build even complex conditions or expressions. So we also have it covered here. Right, so back to this quick review. You could execute any PowerShell script. You could execute a function, which is again interesting for really powerful usages of PS80, because if you use that, you can actually call any function which the toolkit offers. Even if we don't support it like a native, so to say, tile, if it's a custom function which you just wrote, if it's defined somewhere, we'll be able to determine it on the list, and we'll be also able to show you a UI to actually come up with the right parameters. So there is no need to remember all these parameters by heart. Instead, just pick up the function from the toolkit and we'll make sure it's there. If there is something new coming into the toolkit, or like I said, a function that you wrote, for your users, it's going to be available in RayPack as well. So it's super easy to work with that. Now, you could also, like I said, execute some external scripts. For specifically for uninstallation, there's a bunch of methods of removing files, folders, registries, even MSIX, and literally everything that PowerShell can so to say remove. And also, it's pretty easy to work with active setup and setting ini and registry values. So normally you could use any way to start. You can just use pack wrapper to quickly wrap a particular setup and have a starting point with just one common interface. You could use package store to first define what you need using the, so to say, high level editor, and then continue editing in that view. And finally, if I go to the file menu, you could create a new empty project. And this is something new which you'll find in RayPack 7.0, where you just simply can create it completely from scratch. One important thing to note, especially for RayPack users with some more experience, is that we have a support for shared resources, which we call packpoint. The resources may be custom actions for MSI, predefined folders, predefined exclusion lists, and many other. And it's not going to be a surprise that the template for PowerShell app deployment toolkit is also part of that, which means if you have several different templates, maybe for different customers, different users, different departments, or just simply different settings, customized for every specific use, you could have them configured in our settings by going to projects, and there is a place which I also used, where you just say, okay, for that profile, use the following template, and then on runtime, it's easy to change your profile by clicking over there, and then you can just do it quickly and without losing time. So one RayPack can pretty much serve them all, as long as you define different profiles, each having different PSADT. Or obviously, if you want to have it globally in Packpoint, you can just simply edit it, put Packpoint on a shared resource like UNC path, and have all users have access to the same toolkit, making sure that every update to the toolkit, to the branding, or maybe to the logo or image is going to be respected by every single RayPack using that Packpoint. Right. So this is a way how to package with the new pack wrapper project. Again, it's not going to replace complete PowerShell IDE, but that was not the point. The point is to provide a consistent environment, consistent UI of working with PowerShell wrappers. You don't have to be PowerShell user. You don't have to know PSADT to actually work with it, although it will certainly help. And still, you can define clean installation, uninstall, and repair routines using predefined blocks or custom functions, and then at the end, save it as PSADT, and then publish to any deployment system. Or you can also build it like we see on the beginning into the Intune format. So using our build, you could create an Intune package and then have it in Intune. Okay, so I guess there's going to be a few questions about it, which we'll be happy to answer at the end. Let me first make a quick review on some other points which have changed recently, and let me start with the new virtual machines configuration. Like I said in the beginning, we had some complaints that it used to be not quite obvious how to work, especially with Hyper-V. And in this release, we streamlined this UI a bit. So, for example, here is a workstation machine defined, where you can also select a snapshot, the authentication. But otherwise, this is just this small area which needs your attention. everything now more like clear and easy to use. If you want to change the user, you would press an administrator and enter your credentials. If you want to change your snapshot, you would just press the three dots and then use a selector to select the correct snapshot. If you create a Hyper-V machine, there is just some more options. We currently also support Windows authentication, so you can authenticate with the current user. And still, if you need, you can pick up a specific user. So something which, the second option, which used to be also present in the previous version. And also this new streamlined way of defining the machine requires less input from the user. For example, you don't have to provide the IP address anymore. We'll try to auto-detect it, which is really handy, especially if you use dynamic IP addresses. So there is no need to use static anymore. You can still continue to work the old way by providing the IP address, or in some custom scenarios where the resolution is not possible, but otherwise the general principle is we will try to data mine as much as possible and requiring less and less feedback and less input from the user. You can also combine Hyper-V and vSphere machines on the same hosting environment. So I could also add now a vSphere machine to that, and in Packbot have them all running together. In the previous version, if Hyper-V and vSphere were both installed on the same machine, it was not possible, but we've changed this as a kind of feedback to what our users reported to us. In Packbot, it's now possible to work with folders. So if you create a new conversion on one or more machines, and if you add a package, let's just pick up anything here. You could go to the files and there is now a way to add the directory. So this is going to just pull everything that you can find in a single folder, preserving the directory structure, and make sure that these files are correctly sent to the virtual environment. So just few clicks less to work with even complex setups. All right. I said that we also took some time on improvements in the MSIX. Most of them are, so to say, transparent, so you will benefit from them by just trying to convert an MSI or non-MSI setup into the MSIX format. One of them is the integration with or support of Windows 10 21H1. And this means you can, for example, target your dependencies of MSIX project by just picking up the correct build. So let's check it out. It's 19043. And if I select both from the list, now the setup is going to be, the MSIX package is going to be, I think I just did it wrong. No, better. Now the setup is going to be requiring the 21H1 May 2021 build. So, and there are some more places where you can find it. With the recent updates to MSIX, there is now also support for services and startup tasks. But like I said, many of things are happening in the background, like better conversion of COM classes, better conversion of services, and using our native MSIX editor, it's also possible to work with PSF and some other stuff from the MSIX ecosystem, including, like I already said in the beginning, the device guard or app attach, app installer, and several other components. The same happened to Citrix app layering, so you can convert directly from RayPack using our single-click routine, MSI to Citrix, or RPP, our project to Citrix app layering format. And also there, the conversion should be much better with more and more complex structures being correctly resolved. And as a result, more and more packages will just work out of the box without any further manual interaction. We also have integration of signing with device guard. So if your company is using that, you can go and define the device guard signing over there. which also has been improved recently. And finally, one thing maybe also about the Windows 10. Now back to RayQC. Uh, like I said in the beginning, there is a way to perform automatic tests against Windows 10. And in fact, if you start RayQC Advanced, you will find now a new rule set called Windows 10 21 H1 May 2021 update. And it's just an updated rule set which builds on top of the previous ones, making sure that your products imported into RayQC or tested ad hoc can be converted to MSIX, can be started on Windows 10. And we also kept all the previous choices, the AppV server, and some other rule sets so that you can even combine them. And if you are using the automation, you will just have them automatically on board. So the report which says whether the app can be run, can be started on Windows 10 21 H1. All right, so this was a really fast overview of what new things we brought in RayPack 7.0. There is much more. I really recommend seeing our release notes and watching our YouTube videos, webinars and stuff. And now we have 10 minutes where I can answer your questions, or maybe there is something which you want to see more in the detail or clarify. It's going to be a good time to hear from you. So Lara, I think you collected in the meantime messages from chat. So
Yes, that's right. So first of all, thanks a lot, Martin, for the great presentation. And now the first question is, can I build PowerShell script as a part of byte pipelines?
the PowerShell scripts build pipeline. Yeah, so I guess the question was about whether what I was showing today, which was heavily UI driven, whether this could be automated. And the answer is yeah. There is a command line built into RayPack where you can just define your, so to say, input setup and have it wrapped in PSADT. It's going to use the same functionality, so resolving command lines and switches and stuff like that. It might be still a good idea to think about is there any post, so to say, step required? So we can convert, we can wrap, and what you will get from that would be just a common interface, command line to install the product. And if this is everything that you wanted, yeah, we got you covered. But from my experience, in many cases, you want to actually well adjust. So again, open the UI, maybe add some steps and operations. So in that case, some manual intervention might be required. Since we are talking about PS1, you could have your automation build in your pipeline, which adds some extra steps and so, but RayPack has the creation pretty much covered.
Hmm? Okay. How about customization that is needed during uninstall? These are mostly the reason for using MSIX.
Yeah, so I will not claim that PSADT story is a replacement for MSIX. So MSIX is absolutely the great choice for the new software or simple or even complex product. If you have a choice and your guidelines, packaging guidelines accept that, you should go for MSIX, and RayPack would be a great choice supporting you in that. The PSADT has support for that. If I go back to RayPack, and just open some previous project, you could go, no save, you could go to the uninstall part and define the steps on your own. We can bring the uninstall steps automatically for particular types of setups, specifically about the Windows installer. For exe-based setups, it might be not quite possible because every setup does things differently. So what I would do, for example, for the key paths, in knowing how to uninstall the product, I would just simply add a new step called execute process and then make sure to start, for example, unins.exe from program files for key paths. And as such, the whole uninstallation might get covered here. In many cases, it might be also required to remove a file or a directory or registry if the uninstall doesn't do that on its own out of the box. And in that case, you could also use absolutely the same set of functions and features for uninstall part as we already doing for the installation part.
Mhm. So the next question is how often the third-party updates are refreshed? How soon do we get the patch updates, especially the ones with security vulnerabilities, which needs to be deployed on priority?
I think there is no single answer to that. We internally have some process involved for updates of package store packages, and the apps that you may consider critical will get updates frequently and as such are also recognized by our routines. I cannot give now any exact number because I just simply don't know them at that point. Maybe Lara, can you support me on that? Otherwise, we can also clarify this offline with people asking. Mm, but
Yeah, I would say we get in
mhm.
touch with you and schedule a short demo so then we can talk about it. Okay, so the next question is, in which edition is the new feature included?
So it should be available in professional, enterprise, and for the standard part, so we got you covered, and you can start working with the feature happily with your existing license as soon as you switch to 7.0.
Mhm. The next is, where can I get the package store packages?
Um, If you ask the package store packages, there are basically two main choices in terms of packaging. One is something which I was showing, so just create a new project from RayPack, and then there is a choice of packages. There is another one. If you go to packagestore.com, it offers you the list of all packages available, and then you can order them for, so to say, single package. So either flat rate or all-in-one in RayPack, where you get your subscription, or just, so to say, pay for your use from packagestore.com.
Yes, and one additional thing, so when you are visiting the packagestore.com website, there are also 3 free packages, so you can download these packages and try it by your own. Okay, is PowerShell required?
Okay, I guess this question is again about the PSADT. So well, it's a PowerShell toolkit. So yeah, to deploy, the PowerShell is required. I mean, not really on the machine where the packaging happens, which I believe anyway should PowerShell enabled by default. But if you want to deploy either in Intune or just normally using PSADT natively, well, PowerShell must be enabled on the target machine.
Mhm. So about Intune, you haven't shown how to add the detection key. So how does your product configure it?
We do it in the background. So I actually didn't put too much attention into setting up the metadata of the project. But just for your information, if you deploy an MSI-based setup into Intune, we can get information about the detection keys from that. So using the product code, for example, for non-MSI and some custom projects, the detection keys are set up automatically by us and based on your metadata. So it's some artificial addition by RayPack, and it's going to be part of your Intune deployment.
Okay, so that was the last question. So, but if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact us and we will support you at any time. And yes, I would say thanks a lot for joining this webinar and have a nice day. Thanks to Martin for presentation.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye-bye.